Chad Peterman here, and you are listening to Can't Stop the Growth, a platform for leaders and teams to grow and thrive. We highlight the importance of personal development, pursuing greatness, and always chasing your potential. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to another episode of Can't Stop the Growth. I'm your host, Chad Peterman, and today I am really excited about the guests that we have on. I think in all of our companies, when it comes to training, especially within the trades, training is quite the buzzword. And I think if there's anything that I've learned as we've tried to implement different training and learning and development programs within our own business is that having professional insight is critical. There's a difference between good training and actual learning and development. And in order to understand that, bringing in resources that have been doing this throughout their careers, have been doing this at a very high level, I think definitely separates what good learning and development, where people actually comprehend something, are able to display these skills as opposed to checking the box on training. And so today with our guests, I want to dive into what he's seen as critical building blocks to developing a culture within a business that truly embraces this concept of learning and development. And so without further ado, would like to welcome Mr. Steve Sorenson, the Senior Director of Learning and Culture at Johnsonville. Welcome to the podcast, Steve.
Thanks, Chad. I'm really excited to be here and have a robust conversation about learning and development.
Yeah, absolutely. I was doing a little bit of research this morning and was like, oh, wow, we could probably talk for a couple of hours on this stuff. But we'll try to squeeze it into, call it 30 to 40 minutes. That way it's digestible to our listeners. But I guess, Steve, maybe start out by giving listeners, since you're kind of, I guess, technically not from the trades. These are some of my favorite people to talk to because they have such a different perspective that we can implement, and not always talking to the same people, but maybe give listeners a little bit of your background and what you're doing now and what you've done kind of in the past.
Sure. Really high level. I've worked really mainly with two organizations in my career. I spent 17 years at a company called the Schwan Food Company, mainly on the home service and then the global supply chain side, which was the manufacturing facilities, sales folks, things like that. Ran everything from curriculum development to instructional design through succession planning, talent management, performance management, the whole gamut. Then made a move over here to Johnsonville Sausage, and it's been a great move because one of our mission at Johnsonville is to create an environment that requires each of us to fully develop our God-given talents and help others do the same. And I feel here I'm really able to leverage and utilize my talents to the best of my ability. So here I lead a team that's around our organizational learning, organizational development, what we call member services. Most people would call it HR, and then making sure that our culture is robust, right? We want to live the culture that we're talking about and that we've got up on posters and that we chat through, because we do believe at Johnsonville that our culture is upstream of results. So if our culture is working the way we intended to, results just become better, which means members are learning, they're growing, they're becoming the best versions of themselves. So that's what I get to spend time doing every day, is help members go from where they are today, bridge their development, and get to where they want to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the questions I'd like to start with is, you talked a little bit about just a second ago about culture. And I think everybody has their different perspectives on what it is. Is that just something written on the wall? Is that just, like all of those things? How do you guys feel like you guys do it maybe a little bit differently? It sounds like that's kind of at the forefront of kind of how the organization operates. Like, what are the action items that people need to be thinking about when they think about what their culture is and how to let that permeate throughout the organization?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Chad. And a lot of people, to your point, they throw posters up on the wall, or they maybe have values that they leverage, and people talk about it, but it doesn't permeate into their day-to-day actions. And that's, to me, the critical part. So at Johnsonville, and this should be true of any organization, you should, if you really want to have great core values, they should really probably no more than 4 to 5 key values, and they need to be unique and distinctive. And I think that's where a lot of organizations kind of falter. When we went after, we started trying to find and really more discover our values. We started talking to members. What makes a great Johnsonville member versus what doesn't make a great Johnsonville member? What behaviors do they demonstrate? Things like that. And we have found very truly what can really separate kind of the wheat from the chaff on this is the worst behaviors you tolerate in an organization, those will become your culture. So if you're not having a robust conversation, so I think about like for us at Johnsonville, we have 4 core values. It's about humble candor. I need to be able to sit down and have a robust conversation with somebody about where they're excelling and also where they're falling short. But I need to do it with a level of humility and a level of care so they can interpret that conversation. It's about collaborative teamwork. And that doesn't just mean we get everybody in the room and try to figure things out together. I have to be able to be accounted on by others that I'm going to deliver my work at or above expectations. I've got to share relevant information with you, and I've got to expect you're going to do the same, and I've got to trust you to do your part of the job in that. Learning agility, we don't always know how we're going to get there, but we will figure it out. Sometimes that's together. Sometimes I might have to do that on my own. And then lastly, it's personal commitment. And that means I'm going to step into the conversations. I'm going to do my part and be counted on as somebody who can deliver results. So when we think about how you build those into actions, I think it has to be built into everything that we do across the organization. So we think about it from a hire to retire. So when we're trying to attract candidates, are we attracting a certain type of individuals that we know will be successful at Johnsonville? And those are the types of individuals who expect nothing less than personal greatness from themselves and others. So if I expect and accept nothing less, I've already got that internal fire to be my best. So I can bring that person to the organization and I can help them stretch and grow. But our annual review process, we're based off of the cultural behaviors just as much as it is on what did you accomplish. So everywhere along the step, Chad, we try to filter in our behaviors, make sure that we're coming back to that, because if we believe that culture is upstream of results, then we need to be having cultural conversations every day.
Yeah, no, that makes a whole lot of sense from that perspective. Obviously Johnsonville, not a small organization, I would assume has locations in different parts of the country. And, you're kind of while you have a headquarters, there's other people that are responsible for, making sure that this culture stays, intact across the entirety of the organization. How do you guys kind of balance that? Because I think everyone would say if, you brought in a new person, yeah, culture, that's more important than, that it's connected, the results will take care of themselves. How do you guys kind of dive into, that accountability piece of like, are you really bought into that? Especially if you're not at the headquarters and you're tasked with leading this operation in this part of the country or whatever it may be. How do you guys really kind of monitor that and ensure that there's a level of accountability so that you are getting that and you don't have some leader kind of going rogue to get a result thinking that that's the most important thing?
I think that's a great question. And one of our key behaviors that we actually have assigned to our values is that we don't just get the work done over focusing on our values. So that's one of the key behaviors we look for. But some ways that we actually hold folks accountable and measure if people are working on the right processes, there's 2 big things that come to mind. The first is we do an annual voice of member survey. So our members, well, that's what we call our employees. So if you ever hear me say members, that's employees. And every single member in the organization has the opportunity to fill out that member survey result every year. And last year we had 91% completion rate. So we get a high completion percentage that comes off of there, and they can put in their comments. But there's 6 behaviors that they're going to measure their coach on that align back directly to our core values. So it'll be things like a question example would be, does my coach model the behaviors they're expecting of myself? Does my coach exemplify the values of the organization? So every member can rank those, and then we use a heat map that I can take a look and say, okay, where does Chad's members think he falls versus where does Steve's members think he falls? So that's one component, and then we take action items against that, rewarding the ones that are doing really well and help the ones that are struggling. But then the other part I mentioned in that annual review process, there's 2 major components of the annual review. It's one against your work goals. What did you accomplish to drive the business forward this year? That accounts for 50% of your performance review at the end of the year. The other 50% is, are you living the behaviors of the organization? And when we think about our behaviors, we've built just a lanyard pocket map, and this opens up and it it lists out, like, for each behavior, here's ideally what that looks like. Here's what too much of that behavior looks like, and here's what's too little of that value looks like. So everybody carries this around with them, and then those are the same behaviors that we uh, validate at the end of the year in your performance review. So you as a member will fill out a self-review, and you'll answer how frequently do you demonstrate these behaviors, and then your coach will do the same thing, which we have coaches, we don't have bosses or supervisors. And then there's a calibration conversation around that. We also bake it into succession planning. So as we're thinking about what promotions are we looking at in the organization, we do look at performance, which is that component of work are you getting done and how you're getting it done, as well as what's your potential in the organization. So those are a couple of ways that we've built it into the day-to-day fabric of what we do, because we can't just talk about it. We actually have to do things that are going to let people see, oh, yeah, I am living the values, or, oh, I see now where I'm not. Because sometimes we all have blind spots, right?
For sure. Yeah, I think that two important things there. I think feedback, number one, and I think that the critical distinction I want to make about this, because this was something that we learned, and I think is spot on with how you guys are doing it, is it should be feedback not on the organization, but on your direct either coach or manager or whatever you guys call them. Is like, hey, you need to give it on this. Like, yeah, you can give the company thing like, yeah, I wish we had better benefits and a better, like, okay, good. So does everybody. Like, I understand that. But like, how is the person directly responsible for coaching and developing you? How are they doing in these certain areas? I think is just a critical component of it, because if it's just feedback on the entire organization, like there's not a whole lot directionally where we can go with that. It's good to have. And you can throw a few questions in there, but I think it's critical to say this is a review of your direct manager or coach in your guys' instance. So I think that's critical. And then I think the other piece is the behaviors. I think that's where a lot of people miss. It's like, well, we have a value of this. Well, that can look a whole lot of different ways to a lot of different people. And so I think defining not only the values, but the behaviors that we believe are, living out that value, I think is super, super critical. When you think about how are we actually going to see people live these out. And then the piece about succession planning, I think that's something that we think about as like, who's next in line, and then what resources do we need to provide for them, to make sure that they're ready. And it's not, oh, by the way, Billy left and you're next in line, so good luck. What do you guys do in that like as it relates to succession planning? Like, are there programs for people who we've identified are high performers, but maybe not, maybe they just started, or maybe they're, just new into the organization, or whatever it may be. How do you guys kind of tackle that succession planning piece?
It's a couple of tiers to it. So for our what we call executives and our strategy team and extended strategy team, which is probably the top 60 leaders in the organization, we have a very robust succession planning that. So we're getting ready to roll that out for this year, that we've identified what are the critical roles inside the organization. And critical roles are defined as the business will see a marketable and significant impact if that position stays empty for more than 6 months, right? So everybody in the organization is going to say, of course, well, my role is critical, right? We have that self-fulfilling prophecy, and that we want to provide for ourselves. So my role is critical. Well, if it sat for empty for 6 months, would the business suffer dramatically if that happened? So that's how we define critical. Then we go through, and it's a calibration discussion with the coach and all of the peers to look at all of the folks that report up to all of those direct reports. How do we look at them from a 3-tiered performance and a 3-tiered potential? And then outcomes of that become the folks that are in that ready now or ready in 1 to 3 years. We build a targeted development plan, which we base those off of what we call 70-20-10. It's pretty industry standard. 70% of that development should be experiential learning, like projects they're going to work on or experiences they're going to have, different things like that. And then 20% is through working with others, right? Whether it's a mentor, whether it's an executive coach, something like that. And then 10% is the formal learning that you need to go after and get. So there we can build in 360 programs. We have a couple of 360s that we do. One is specifically on our cultural behaviors, and then the other one is more on competencies of the work that's required to do that position. Now, for somebody brand new or at lower levels in our organization from an hierarchical standpoint, we look at things like career maps. So here's the competencies that I need in my particular role. If I want to move to the next role, what are the competencies that I need to be building? And each one of those competencies have anywhere from 3 to 5 key actions. Those are kind of this is what that looks like. Because I thought you brought up a really good point, Chad. When you think about values or even competencies, if I say one of our values is respect, how you define you being respectful to somebody and how I define it might be very different. So I can't say, Chad, I expect you to be respectful to folks. We need to narrow it down to what are the exact observable behaviors. And then you also had a really good point. It is about that constant and ongoing feedback. I need to reinforce the behaviors when I see them that you're doing them well. And I need to redirect the behaviors and the actions that I see that are taking you off the path. So we look at it a couple of different ways from a very structured process. We do permeate that down through the organization. But if you're brand new, then it's about the career maps and what's that next role look like and what do I need to do to prepare to get to there.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit. I'm very interested in this. Like, okay, we get this layer of feedback um, as it relates to the values and the behaviors and so on and so forth with in your guys' organization, a coach. What would that program look like if I've got a coach and, there's obviously the ones hey, you're way off, like different conversation, but like someone who just needs to like, they got a few things, they're a little rough around the edges, but they're getting the results. This team seems to, be performing for them. But they've got a few areas like how targeted, how not targeted, like what does that kind of coaching look like with that particular individual that may be just like, hey, you're not like falling off the wagon, but you're also got some room for improvement. Like what's that look like within the organization?
Yeah, that's a tough spot because that point of how far off the wagon, to use your terminology, is can be sometimes subjective. So that's where we like to use what do members experiencing, right? I think we've all worked with folks that they coach up really, really well. So if you talk to their boss, their coach, their superior, they're gonna be like, oh, that person's awesome. They do everything I'm doing because they're focused on more of the results of the side of things. But then when you talk to their direct reports or maybe their support functions, they're like, this guy's kind of a jackwagon. Whenever I deal with them, he just leaves bodies behind him or she does that. So it starts out with sometimes that 360, and how we pick who should do those 360s comes out of that survey result. So what are members saying about that particular person? So we're starting a program where we're looking at who are what we call, we haven't decided the term, but they're red across the board on the behaviors. And that just means they're really far away from the company average of what are we expecting out of our leaders. And if their members are feeling that this is a coach that really needs some help on the behavioral side, then we've got programs that we can go in there. We have a series of programs. We actually call it Sharpen Your Axe. So it's a great tie into what you talked about, Chad, of if they just need to sharpen their skills a little bit, hone those leadership tendencies. These are a 10 series course around various things like how do you give effective feedback, great versus superlative, effective communication, things like that, making decisions. And not every coach is going to need all of those, but a coach might need one or two. And then we are just getting ready. We're kicking off the next session here, starts actually tomorrow, of a coaching foundations course that our vision is that every leader that comes into the organization would go through this 6-month cohort. It's got a 2-day kickoff of this is what coaching looks like at Johnsonville. This is how we coach differently. This is what it looks like. This is what it doesn't look like. Then there's actions that they go back and do. So in month 2, might be you're going to have a one-on-one with your coach, and then you have an action. You need to go give 5 people redirective feedback this week. The next time it's about having a career conversation with 2 members. So we're building in actual practical so they can take these behaviors and take them back out to the job. But back to your other question, how do you identify when folks just have some 1 or 2 things that they need to focus on? It really starts with educating more of the senior leaders of are they looking for the whole picture? Or are they just focused on somebody that can deliver results and they're not focused on the behavioral things? Because you and I both know, and everybody listening knows, that if I don't have a great relationship with my coach, like if I think my coach is somebody who's trying to hold me back, I'm just a number, people leave organizations because they have bad coaches. right? They leave because that boss is somebody that doesn't care about me as a person. They're not invested in me as a person. They don't care if I'm really successful. I'm just here to help them get their results. Well, we want to try to shift that narrative. Well, that starts with making sure senior leaders understand that whole person. Are they delivering results, and how are they doing it?
Absolutely. One of the things you said earlier that I want to kind of revisit, because I think, especially in the trades, it's that there's a difficulty when you're staring across the table from someone who may potentially join the organization, who's been a plumber for 10 years. They've got all the technical expertise, but there's a few things that you're just like, I don't know. And plumbers are hard to find. And it's like, I may just take a flyer on this guy and see if, we can kind of plug a square peg into a round hole and maybe it works out, so on and so forth. From the beginning, it sounds like you guys are very intentional about who you hire and what that hiring process looks like. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think that could be helpful for listeners who are kind of struggling with, well, I can never seem to get the right people
Mm-hmm.
on the bus. How in the heck do I do this? Do you guys use any sort of personality test? Like, what's that process look like?
Sure. So when you think about hiring folks in the trade, we do that same thing as far as like we've got mechanics, we've got electrical technicians, we've got all those things. And you're exactly right. Sometimes you could get blinded by, man, this person's got all the right skill sets. First off, when we think about any organization, every organization that's ever been out there has known people that have had great careers before they come to the company. They come to the organization and they struggle and it's not maybe a good fit, and they leave and they go have a great career somewhere else. It doesn't mean they were a bad person. It just mean it wasn't a great fit for what you as an organization are trying to achieve. So some of the things that we look for is from that personality fit. So depending on the level in the organization, mainly office technical salaried, we do a predictive index. For maintenance folks and things like that, we tend to do more of a skill assessment, but then we have a conversation with them. So how we do our hiring is through interview teams. So if we're going to hire somebody, it isn't just they're going to sit down with one person. They're going to sit down with some peers. They're going to sit down with maybe somebody they're going to support. They're going to sit down with leader and maybe somebody else. So typically somewhere around between 5 to 6 people are going to be on that interview team. And we'll go through, we typically do a presentation or some sort of skill analysis to see how are they doing against that piece. But then we give different competencies to different people on the skills. So we'll say, okay, can you, Chad, really dig into their ability to drive collaborative teamwork? How do they work across things? How personally committed are they? Because we want to find the folks that have that internal burning desire to be the best versions of themselves. Because if we can hire you and you've got a desire to be better and better and better every day, it's easier for us to develop, and it's easier for folks. You don't want to be pushing that person and trying to light a fire beneath them every day. But if you've got somebody that's coming in with a mindset of, I've already achieved everything I need to do, I'm there, I'm here to just do the work. Well, that's what you have to look at in the organization and say, they may drive some great results, but when they have to interact with customers, whether it's out in the field or if they're going to a customer's home or something like that, how are they going to react and interact when things get tough, right? Customer or a client doesn't agree with the approach, or the members on our floor, they need to interact with them to find the best process to do troubleshooting, all those types of things. So we spend a lot of time on that. Are you a good fit culturally? So we can dig into the behaviors that we have and show me some examples. Give me an example of a time where you had a great idea, but somebody changed your mind. That might be a great question to ask somebody who's in a plumbing. Like, they're going to come in and say, I already know the answers to this. Well, how do you balance getting other people's perspective? So we tend to spend a lot of time on more of those behavioral questions when we interview.
Okay. Would that be, I was going to ask you next, like, because I think this is an area we struggle is, our managers or coaches are interviewing somebody and they may not have all the skills to be a great interviewer. It's like, well, I don't know that we really got at any of that. What would be the best piece of advice you could give to a leader that, like, interviewing advice, like things like, hey, if you do this one thing every time, like, you're going to get a lot farther than if you just are like, well, tell me a little bit about what you've done, just the kind of generic questions that anybody can answer.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is first and foremost, you got to make sure you know what legally you can and legally you can't ask, right? That's kind of, so we've got some courses around here for that. There's lots of stuff out online. The other thing is if you're not using AI for these types of things, it can be a big helpful step, right? We use Copilot. Type in, here's the behaviors that I'm looking for in the organization. Here's the position that I'm hiring for. What might be some core questions? But I think the real key is how well are you interviewing and giving people the keys to what should they answer. So I give you an example. Let's say I ask you a question and you're answering the questions the way I want it to be answered. Sometimes as leaders we'll be like, oh, that's great. Yeah, I love that answer. Well, all that's telling me is I should continue to answer that way, right? Or it's, oh, that's not really what I'm looking for. Let them answer the question. Don't try to drive them. And then the other piece is be really, really cautious around confirmation bias. It's really easy for me to just hire people that are like me because they're going to talk the way I do. You've got to really think about what's the role you're hiring for and what do I need that person to do? And don't just hire people that sound and act like you, because in a lot of cases, that's not going to help you out. It's just going to build a very one-dimensional team.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think your point about using AI to come up with some of those questions, like, yeah, AI is not for everything, but to me, that's a really great place of like, I don't even know what to ask or how should I frame this question so that I don't give them the answer. I don't kind of lead them down this path, whatever it may be. So I think that's a great piece of advice. One of the other things I was going to ask you is obviously you've been in this pretty much your whole career of this like learning and development. What have you found is like the key pieces that people are missing when they think about like a very effective kind of L&D department versus like we're just doing training to check the box type thing? Like, what do you think? I mean, I'm sure that there was a time when it was just like training is training, and then as you learned and figured out things, it's like, hold on, there's a whole lot more to this. Like, what would you say are the key differences between training to check the box and then like a very like comprehensive kind of L&D function within a business?
Yeah, it's something that I talk about with my team all the time, and quite honestly, they're probably tired of hearing me say it. Is our role in L&D is not to sell solutions. Our role is to solve problems. So we need to find what's the problem that you're really trying to deal with. Could be an individual problem, could be a team problem, could be an organizational problem. Then we'll dissect. We'll go through some human performance consulting almost, figure out what is really the problem we're trying to solve. Then we can identify the solutions that are going to have the true impact of that. But then it comes with some accountability of don't just send me people to train because you think they need the training. Then don't follow up on it all. If we've gone and spent the time and energy and effort to educate them, to help them see things differently, different behaviors, and they go back to the job and there's no expectation to actually apply and use those skills, it's a complete waste of time. But that's where I find L&D companies or L&D organizations tend to struggle the most is they've got their core like bag of tricks, if you will, the solutions that have worked for many things, and they want to apply those solutions to everything. And I think about it in the trades, like if you're a carpenter, right? If I'm sitting there and I got to drive a nail into this wall and I'm looking around, I don't have a hammer on me, but I've got this really robust wrench, I might just at one time use that wrench to pound that in. But the problem is that's not the best tool for it. So in a short term, yes, it can help, but it's the same thing in L&D. Are you using the right solution to solve the needs that the organization has? Or are you just trying to sell the solutions that you like doing?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we run into here, and I'm sure you guys probably do. I'm kind of biased because I've only really worked in two organizations, but what is advice that you would give to the leader trying to navigate the different generational differences? I think we have this all the time. It's like, you got the, old school plumber who's like, well, just get out there and work hard. And they're like, well, these kids don't want to work hard. And it's like, well, no, like there's every generation before the current generation that we're talking about has complained about the one that came after them. What do you guys have any training? Like how do you kind of coach leaders or coaches in kind of dealing with different, and it could even be like different personality types. I mean, you mentioned don't hire everybody that just sounds like you, but like, how do you guys kind of train your people to like navigate those generational kind of differences?
Yeah, it's a tricky spot because to your point, every organization has had this where the one generation complains about the one behind them, but the same is true. The younger generation complains about the older generation. And it isn't just generation, it's also if there's a difference in social economics that you had growing up. If you grew up in a single parent household versus a two-parent household, if you grew up in the country and you were on a farm versus if you were in the city. There's all those differences that start to add up. And I think it always boils back to everybody has what we call these personal needs that they need to be met. And I think about that as I want to be valued, I want to be respected, I want to be understood, I want to matter, and I want to belong. So how do we have conversations that help find out what are the true personal needs that people have? It doesn't matter if you're getting ready to retire or you're brand new into the workforce. You're going to want to feel valued, respected, and understood. You're going to want people to ask your opinion or ask for you to engage in the conversation. I want to continue to grow and be able to share my expertise. But then there's also those practical needs that have to be met in order to, how are we going to make decisions? How are we going to go after this? That seems to be easier for organizations in getting that kind of that work done. I think the harder part is connecting with people. And I think at the core of it, I mean, I don't know anybody that really, if they truly answer from their heart of hearts, wakes up every morning and just says, you know what, I'm going to screw things up today. I'm going to significantly disappoint everybody at work. Now, how they go about that work and how it might manifest themselves is very different. So it's trying to understand that, right? I think about my kids who are entering the workforce now. They've grown up in a generations where they've seen that, companies are maybe not as loyal as they used to be, right? So they see people jumping from job to job. They want to move up quickly. Well, some of that's been how they've been raised up as or as individuals, right? We didn't have this computer in my pocket that told me that, I mean, you think about what we have today. This has got the sum of all the world's knowledge and information at my fingertips. But the downside is I don't have to remember anything. I can just look it up. I can just Google it. I can just ask AI about it. Where if you're, from my generation or even a generation older, you probably still remember your phone number growing up or your friend's favorite phone number. Well, now you don't have to remember some of that information. Things are coming so quickly to that younger generation. So I think it's just a step back and asking yourself this really rich question. Why would a reasonable, rational person who has a mother that loves them do something like that? And if you can start to try to understand the other person's perspective, you don't have to agree to it. You're just trying to seek to understand. And that helps pave the way quite a ways, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's such an interesting like problem to try and help solve, and to try to get people to see different perspectives and where people are coming from and so on and so forth. But if we take the extra step, to me, it's definitely a worthy cause because there's nothing better than like really working at it and finally making that connection to where like, oh my gosh, like I couldn't get so-and-so to do anything. And now he's, setting the world on fire. How did that happen? So I think that's an interesting kind of problem to solve for sure.
And it usually comes through when you make that connection finally.
Yeah.
When you understand where they're coming from and they can understand what you're trying to achieve, all of a sudden there's that personal connection gets made. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden it makes it so much easier.
Yeah, I mean, I think I actually, we had an orientation class this morning and I said that exact same thing that you did is, hey, it's our belief that none of you people that are just joining our team are ever going to show up here and just be like, I'm really going to wreck this thing today. Like, this is going to be epic. And so, it's, hey, how can we all work together to, kind of figure out these problems? I think some of my favorite stories are, we have kind of operational meetings every week, just kind of check in. How's every location doing? How are people doing? And then like I told our regional managers, I was like, you do realize that like there are a number of what I would consider high performers now that 6 months ago were the people that we were like, he's kind of on the chopping block, like he's not performing, not doing all of this stuff. And I'm like, you see, this is the leadership piece. This is when they are doing something notably different, getting a notably different result, that is because of leadership. It's not because a lot of times they didn't like just self-discover something. They were probably struggling with something and we dove in to help them. And all of a sudden we made that connection and it's clicked and it's like, oh, well, I like this a lot better than struggling all the time. That was a heck of a lot easier. But I think it's trying to highlight those success stories that I feel like oftentimes we're just on to the next problem. And it's like, no, let's sit and celebrate this. We're really happy for, whoever it is that has found their way for sure.
I agree. I think that's true with a lot of organizations. And sometimes we think about that not celebrating as, oh, we got to have this big thing. It doesn't have to be that. It could be a minute at the end of a team meeting, or it could just be, hey, everybody, I just want to point this out. Chad, I really appreciate you've gone from this to this in the last 6 months. I think that's fantastic. You're doing the great work. I really appreciate it. It could be just simple like that. Could be even a post-it note you leave on their desk or their workstation or their toolbox or whatever. Those different things that how do we just connect those dots? Because at the end of the day, we all want those human connections, right? We're all here for a purpose. I mean, if any of us were independently wealthy, most of us aren't going to be coming in every day to the same job, right? It'd be like, hey, I'm good. Most of us are here because we have to pay for a mortgage or help our kids get raised, put a roof overhead, food on the table, things like that. So we're all here for that purpose. So how do we help tie that into how can we help each other achieve even greater things?
Absolutely. Um, One of the pieces that I've kind of latched onto, I don't know where I came up with this. I'm guessing I learned it from somebody, but it was kind of the notion of like culture can't just be the words on the wall. It can't just be similar to what we've talked about, but like, how do you guys ensure that like, because I'm a big believer that like culture is consistency. Whatever we do consistently is going to become our culture. Like, what are some of those things that you guys may do there at Johnsonville that you feel like, yeah, that because we do it consistently, we do these things just like, it's almost second nature. It's just like part of how we operate. What are maybe some examples of things that you guys do that you think are like, hey, this really drives it home. Everybody seems to, maybe not everybody, but the majority of people seem to really respond to this one thing we do that's related to kind of enforcing our culture here at the company.
Yeah, to me, it all comes down to the conversations that a coach is having with their people. So the things that we try to help with is like we have it looks like a deck of cards and they're conversations. And it's meant to be that every week when you have your team meeting, you pull out one card and it could be a question you ask the team, it could be a challenge, but you're talking about those behaviors on a regular basis. I think we do that really well. And what's amazing, Chad, is the coaches that have used those have come back and said, these things are phenomenal. They help us keep the conversation alive. But then we bake it into, we have a 30, 60, 90-day onboarding kind of formal review. Our values are baked into that. There's questions around, hey, how do you see yourself doing this? It's in how we hire people. It's in our annual review. It's in our surveys. But to me, those things are all meant to be sparking the conversation. And do we have visuals up? Absolutely. We've got a poster that kind of encapsulates all of our culture in one thing. It's in every conference room. It's in every break room. When you come in the doors to any building, you're going to see our compass, which is our iconography for our culture. It's right there. You see it on the walls. You see banners hanging that talk about it. But those things are only good if it's sparking conversation. And the conversation isn't like, oh, well, it's good to see it on the wall. I'd love to see it in practice. So as we take those survey results, which we spend a lot of time on every year, we really dive into the coaches that are really doing that well and the ones that are struggling and try to pair them up with each other. So we have something for our coaches. We call it Coaching Club. We do it every quarter. We have a different topic. It usually aligns into something around our values. And coaches come together in a safe environment and they talk about where are you struggling on this particular topic, right? There's some pre-work that they do, but then it's just an open conversation. I think that's worked really well. Any leadership development course that we offer that a lot of our folks take advantage of, our values are built right into it, and they're built in more scenario-based of how we're doing. Something I'm really excited about, we haven't launched it yet, we're building it right now, is we're looking at a coaching tool that it's based in AI. So you will have a conversation with scenarios that we're developing. Might be, hey, you've got somebody that's showing up late for work 3 times in a row. How do you have that conversation? And the great thing about having that AI coaching through that conversation is it doesn't take in the personal biases. It can look at it and say, here's what you said. Hey, here's some ways to look at it. Because if you think about giving feedback to people, sometimes that's a little bit uncomfortable. And what we can do with that is we can say, take the scenario today, we're going to go through some activities to plan it, and then 6 months later, take the same scenario again. And are you improving along the process? So everything we do tries to tie back to, are you having the day-to-day conversations? Because if I, as a coach, am having the right conversations effectively with my members, they're going to leave and have additional different conversations. But if I, as a coach, if I don't believe in this, I don't think the organization's doing the right thing, I think we're on the wrong path, just through transparency, my members are going to think the same thing, and they're going to act differently.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, Steve, a wealth of knowledge here, as far as I've got a bunch of notes written down on things that we can get better at. I really like the kind of, hey, it sounds weird to use AI to facilitate a conversation between two humans, but I think you're spot on. It's amazing what these tools can do and how they can help us. I guess as we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to leave kind of listeners with as it relates to kind of, making sure that your culture's right in your organization, the learning and development are all tied to it? I mean, you've said a lot, but I didn't know if there was anything that we may not have covered that you'd like to, feel like is important, that you'd like to leave listeners with.
One thing that I would like to leave listeners with is kind of a tool, if you will, of it all. Most things come back when there's a challenge or there's a performance gap. It typically comes back to, do I know what's expected of me? So there's a tool that I use with all of my members whenever I coach them. I call it the ABC decisions. And once we get clear on them, it makes it really easy. So an A decision, or Chad, there's the decisions I want you to make, and I don't even want to know you're making it, right? So you're out of this pipe, you're going to flip over to this pipe, to use your plumbing example. It's the same connector. I don't even need to know it happened. Just go ahead and make the decision. B's are the ones that are the things that let's just build in the capability so I know what you're doing, and I can back you up, if you will. So, hey, I did this. I just want you to know that if it comes up, this challenge. So for me, it would be, if it's going to lead a conversation that a customer is going to call me and ask a question, or another leader is going to call me, just so I have some backup and information so I know what to defend you against. And then the C are things like, let's just consult on these. These are going to have either a financial impact or it could impact a customer wanting to do business with us again. Let's chat about it before you make the decision. But the nice thing is, I just had this conversation with a member on my team yesterday. She came and gave me she was treating it like a C conversation. Hey, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? Does this make sense? And we had the conversation. And then I said, you know what, Kelly, in the future, this is probably a B decision. You go ahead and make the decision on that type of thing, and then just give me a text on what you did so I can back you up on it. But to me, once people know what the guide rails are, it makes it so much easier for them to take action. And I find a lot of times what holds cultures back is people don't know, when can I take action? When can't I take action? What are those guardrails that are in there?
Yeah, I think that's a huge point, because it's the piece that I always hear from our leaders is like, well, I don't know why so-and-so just isn't doing it. Like, why aren't they just figuring it out? It's like, well, have we taught them? Do we know? Are they aware of, they can just go, they own this, they can go make this decision. And so I love that framework, as far as empowering your people to make decisions. I think as leaders, we all want our people to go make decisions, go do it. But I think having the guardrails allows them to feel a little bit more comfortable in making a decision that, could have an impact on the business one way or the other. So,
yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, Steve, again, thank you for your time. I know you're busy. I know I learned a ton. I'm sure listeners will learn a ton as well, as it relates to kind of how do we integrate that culture within the business and really use it to drive the business forward. I think it's a scary topic, because we often think, well, we just got to do the work to get the result. And I think there's so much more, and I think we can get so much more powerful results if we allow culture to kind of take the lead. So, Steve, thanks again for joining. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. I really appreciate it as well.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to connect, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. Don't forget to check out our YouTube channel, and as always,